Southeastern North Carolina radio reading service, a United Way partner agency. We welcome you to its program entitled Off the Bookshelf. Your reader is Hiba Harb, and I will be reading The Kite Runner, written by Khalid Husseini. Last time we found out that Hassan is Amir's brother, and that Hassan got shot along with Farzana, his wife. Amir set out to Kabul to find Hassan's son, Sohrab. It's okay. Farid had warned me. He had. But as it turned out, he had wasted his breath. We were driving down the crated road that winds from Jalalabad to Kabul. It's not working.
1600, 16, yeah, that's right. This is the This is the
We'll have to repeat everything.
If you want. Okay.
Do I start? This is the Southeastern North Carolina Radio Reading Service, a United Way partner agency. We welcome you to its program entitled Off the Bookshelf. Your reader is Hiba Harb, and I will be reading The Kite Runner by Khalid Husseini. Last time we found out that Hassan is Amir's brother, but he got shot along with Farzana, his wife. Amir set out to Kabul to find Hassan's son, Sohrab. Chapter 20. Farid had warned me. He had. But as it turned out, he had wasted his breath. We were driving down the graded road that went from Jalalabad to Kabul. Last time I traveled that road was in a tarpaulin-covered truck going the other way. Baba had nearly gotten himself shot by a singing Stone Rusi officer. Baba had made me so mad that night, so scared, and ultimately so proud. The trek between Kabul and Jalalabad, a bone-jarring ride down a teetering path snaking through the rocks, had become a relic now, a relic of two wars. 20 years earlier, I had seen some of the first war with my own eyes. Grim reminders of it were strewn along the road, burned carcasses of old Soviet tanks, overturned military trucks gone to rust, a crushed Russian jeep that had plunged over the mountainside. The Second War I had watched on my TV screen, and now I was seeing it through Farid's eyes. Swerving effortlessly around potholes in the middle of the broken road, Farid was a man in his element. He had become much chattier since our overnight stay at Wahid's house. He had me sit in the passenger seat and looked at me when he spoke. He even smiled once or twice. Maneuvering the steering wheel with his mangled hand, he pointed to mud hut villages along the way where he'd known people years before. Most of the people, he said, were either dead or in refugee camps in Pakistan. All, and sometimes, the dead are luckier, he said. He pointed to the crumbled, charred remains of a tiny village. It was just a tuft of blackened, roofless walls now. I saw a dog sleeping along one of the walls. I had a friend there once, Farid said. He was a very good bicycle repairman. He played the tabla well too. The Taliban killed him and his family and burned the village. We drove past the burned village, and the dog didn't move. In the old days, the drive from Jalalabad to Kabul took 2 hours, maybe a little more. It took Farid and me over 4 hours to reach Kabul. And when we did, Farid warned me just after we passed the Mahi Pardal. Kabul is not the way you remember it, he said. So I hear. Farid gave me a look that said hearing is not the same as seeing. And he was right, because when Kabul finally did unroll before us, I was certain, almost absolutely certain, that he had taken a wrong turn somewhere. Farid must have seen my stupefied expression, shuttling people back and forth to Kabul. He would have become familiar with that expression on the faces of those who hadn't seen Kabul for a long time. He patted me on the shoulder. "Welcome back," he said, morosely. Rubble and beggars, everywhere I looked. That was what I saw. I remembered beggars in the old days too. Baba always carried an extra handful of Afghani bills in his pocket just for them. I'd never seen him deny a peddler. Now, although they squatted at every street corner dressed in shredded burlap rugs, mud-caked hands held out for a coin, and the beggars were mostly children now, thin and grim-faced, some no older than 5 or 6. They sat in the laps of their burqa-clad mothers alongside gutters at busy street corners and chanted, "Bakshish, bakshish," and something else, something I hadn't noticed right away. Hardly any of them sat with an adult male. The wars had made fathers a rare commodity in Afghanistan. We were driving westbound toward the Kartese district on what I remembered as a major thoroughfare in the 70s, Jade Mainland. Just north of us was the bone-dry Kabul River. On the hills to the south stood the broken old city wall. Just east of it was the Bala Hisar fort, the ancient citadel that the warlord Dostum had occupied in 1992. On the Shir Darwaza mountain range, the same mountains from which Mujahideen forces had showered Kabul with rockets between 1992 and 1996 and inflicted much of the damage I was witnessing now. The Shir Darwaza range stretched all the way west. It was from those mountains that I remember the firing of the Tope Chast, the noon cannon. It went off every day to announce noontime and also to signal the end of daylight fasting during the month of Ramadan. You'd hear the roar of that cannon all through the city in those days. I used to come here to Jade Mainland when I was a kid, I mumbled. There used to be shops here and hotels, neon lights and restaurants. I used to buy kites from an old man named Saiful. He ran a little kite shop by the old police headquarters. The police headquarters is here, Farid said. No shortage of police in the city, but you won't find kites or kite shops in Jade Mainland or anywhere else in Kabul. Those days are over. Jade Mainland turned into a giant sandcastle. The buildings that had entirely collapsed barely stood. The buildings that hadn't entirely collapsed barely stood, with caved-in roofs and walls pierced with rocket shells. Entire blocks had been obliterated to rubble. I saw a bullet-pocketed sign, half buried at an angle in a heap of debris. It read, "Drink Coca-Cola." I saw children playing in the ruins of the windowless building, amid jagged stumps of brick and stone. Bicycle riders and mule-drawn carts swerved around kids, stray dogs, and piles of debris. A haze of dust hovered over the city and across the river. A single plume of smoke rose to the sky. "Where are the trees?" I said. "People cut them down for firewood in the winter," Farid said. "The Shorawi cut a lot of them down too." "Why?" "Snipers used to hide in them." A sadness came over me. Returning to Kabul was like running into an old forgotten friend and seeing that life hadn't been good to him, that he'd become homeless and destitute. My father built an orphanage in Kona, the old city, south from here, I said. "I remember it," Farid said. "It was destroyed a few years ago." "Can you pull over?" I said. "I want to take a quick walk here." Farid parked along the curb on the small back street next to a ramshackle, abandoned building with no door. "That used to be a pharmacy," Farid muttered as we exited the truck. We walked back to Jade Mainland and turned right, heading west. "What's that smell?" I said. Something was making my eyes water. "Diesel," Farid replied. "The city's generators are always going down, so electricity is unreliable, and people use diesel fuel." "Diesel, I remember what the street smelled like in the old days." Farid smiled. "Kebab. Lamb kebab," I said. "Lamb," Farid said, tasting the word in his mouth. "The only people in Kabul who get to eat lamb now are the Taliban." He pulled on my sleeve. "Speaking of which..." A vehicle was approaching us. "Beard patrol," Farid murmured. That was the first time I saw the Taliban. I'd seen them on TV, on the internet, on the cover of magazines, and in newspapers. But here I was now, less than 50 feet from them, telling myself that the sudden taste in my mouth wasn't unadulterated, naked fear. Telling myself my flesh hadn't suddenly shrunk against my bones, and my heart wasn't battering. Here they came, in all their glory. The red Toyota pick-up truck idled past us. A handful of stern-faced young men sat on their haunches in the cab, Kalashnikovs slung on their shoulders. They all wore beards and black turbans. One of them, a dark-skinned man in his early 20s with thick, knitted eyebrows, twirled a whip in his hand and rhythmically swatted the side of the truck with it. His roaming eyes fell on me, held my gaze. I'd never felt so naked in my entire life. Then the Taliban spat tobacco-stained spittle and looked away. I found I could breathe again. The truck rolled down Jade Mainland, leaving in its trail a cloud of dust. "What's the matter with you?" Farid hissed. "What? Don't ever stare at them. Do you understand? Never." "I didn't mean to," I said. "Your friend is quite right, You might as well poke a rabid dog with a A stick, someone said. The new voice belonged to an old beggar sitting barefoot on the steps of a bullet-scarred building. He wore a threadbare chapin worn to frayed shreds and a dirt-crusted turban. His left eyelid drooped over an empty socket. With an arthritic hand, he pointed to the direction the truck had gone. They drive around looking and hoping that someone will provoke them. Sooner or later, someone always obliged. Then the dogs feast on the day's boredom is broken at last, and everyone says Allahu Akbar. And on those days, when no one offends, well, there's always random violence, isn't there? Keep your eyes on your feet when the Talibans are near, Farid said. Your friend dispenses good advice, the old beggar chimed in. He barked a wet cough and spat in a soiled handkerchief. Forgive me, but could you spare a few Afghanis? He breathed. Bas, let's go. Farid said, pulling me by the arm. I handed the old man 100,000 Afghanis, or the equivalent of about $3. When he leaned forward to take the money, his stretched like sour milk and feet that hadn't been washed in weeks flooded my nostrils and made my gorge rise. He hurriedly slipped the money in his waist, his lone eye darting side to side. A world of thanks for your benevolence, Agha Sahib. Do you know where the orphanage is in Kite? I said. It's not hard to find. It's just west of Darul Aman Boulevard, he said. The children were moved from here to Kite after the rockets hit the old orphanage, which is like saving someone from the lion's cage and throwing them in the tigers. Thank you, Agha, I said. I turned to go. That was your first time, eh? I'm sorry. The first time you saw a Talib? I said nothing. The old beggar nodded and smiled, revealed a handful of remaining teeth, and all cracked and yellow. I remember the first time I saw them, rolling into Kabul. What a joyous day that was, he said. An end to the killing. Wah wah. But like the poet says, how seamless seemed love, and then came trouble. A smile sprouted on my face. I know that ghazal. That's Hafiz. Yes, it is, indeed, the old man replied. I should know. I used to teach it at the university. You did? The old man coughed. From 1958 to 1996, I taught Hafiz, Khayyam, Rumi, Baydal, Jami, Saadi. Once, I was even a guest lecturer in Tehran, 1971, that was. I gave a lecture on the mystic Baydal. I remember how they all stood and clapped. How? He shook his head. But you saw those young men in the truck? What value do they see in Sufism? My mother taught it at the university. I said. And what was her name? Sophia Akram. His eye managed to twinkle through the veils of cataracts. The desert breed lives on, but the flower of spring blooms and wilts. Such grace, such dignity, such a tragedy. You knew my mother? I asked, kneeling before the man. Yes, indeed, the old beggar said. We used to sit and talk after class. The last time was on a rainy day just before final exams, when we shared a marvelous slice of almond cake together. Almond cake with hot tea and honey. She was rather obviously pregnant by then, and all the more beautiful for it. I will never forget what she said to me that day. What? Please tell me. Baba had always described my mother to me in broad strokes, like she was a great woman. But what I had always thirsted for were the details. The way her hair glittered in the sunlight, her favorite ice cream flavor, the songs she liked to hum. Did she bite her nails? Baba took his memories of her to the grave with him. Maybe speaking her name would have reminded him of his guilt, of what he had done so soon after she died. Or maybe his loss had been so great, his pain so deep, he couldn't bear to talk about her. Maybe both. She said, I'm so afraid. And I said, why? And she said, because I'm so profoundly happy, Dr. Rasool. Happiness like this is frightening. I asked her why, and she said, they only let you to be happy if you're preparing to take something from you. If they are preparing to take something from you. And I said, hush up now, enough of this silliness. Farid took my arm. We should go, Amir Agha, he said softly. I snatched my arm away. What else? What else did she say? The old man's features softened. I wish I remembered for you, but I don't. Your mother passed away a long time ago, and my memory is as shattered as these buildings. I'm so sorry. But even a small thing, anything at all. The old man smiled. I'll try to remember, and that's a promise. Come back and find me. Thank you, I said. Thank you so much. And I meant it. Now I knew my mother had liked almond cake and honey, with honey and hot tea, that she'd once used to the word profoundly, and that she'd fretted about her happiness. I had just learned more about my mother from this old man on the street than I ever did from Baba. Walking back to the truck, neither of us commented about what most non-fans would have seen as an improbable coincidence. That a beggar on the street would happen to know my mother, because we both knew that in Afghanistan, and particularly in Kabul, such absurdity was commonplace. Baba used to say, take two Afghans who've never met, put them in a room for 10 minutes, and they'd figure out how they're related. We left the old man on the steps of that building. I meant to take up on his offer, come back and see if he'd unearthed any more stories about my mother, but I never saw him again. We found the new orphanage in the northern part of Kurdistan, along the banks of dried up Kabul River. It was flat, barrack style building with splintered walls and windows, boarded with planks of wood. Farid had told me on the way there that Kurdistan had been one of the most war-ravaged neighborhoods in Kabul, and as we stepped out of the truck, the evidence was overwhelming. The cratered streets were flanked by little more than ruins of shelled buildings and abandoned homes. We passed the rubble skeleton of an overturned car, a TV set with no screen, half buried in rubble, a wall with the words Zindabad Tan Iran, long live the Taliban, sprayed in black. A short, thin, balding man with a shaggy grey beard opened the door. He wore a ragged tweed jacket, a skull cap, and a pair of eyeglasses, with one chipped lens resting on the tip of his nose. Behind the glasses, tiny eyes like black peas flitted from me to Farid. Salam alaikum, he said. Salam alaikum, I said. I showed him the Polaroid. We're searching for this boy. He gave the photo a cursory glance. I'm sorry, I have never seen him. You barely look at the picture, my friend, Farid said. Why not take a closer look? Lutfan, I added, please. The man behind the door took the picture, studied it, handed it back. Sorry, I know just about every single child in this institution, and that one does not look familiar. Now, if you'll permit me, I have work to do. He closed the door, locked the bolt. I rapped on the door with my knuckles. Agha, please open the door. We don't mean him any harm. I told you he's not here. His voice came from the other side. No, please go away. Farid stepped up to the door, rested his forehead on it. Friend, we are not with the Taliban, he said in a low, cautious voice. The man who's with me wants to take this boy to a safe place. I came from Peshawar, I said. A good friend of mine knows an American couple there who run a charity home for children. I felt the man's presence on the other side of the door, sensed him standing there, listening, hesitating, caught between suspicion and hope. Look, I knew Sahrab's father, I said. His name was Hassan. His mother's name was Farzana. He called his grandmother Sasa. He knows how to read and write, and he's good with a slingshot. There's hope for this boy, Agha, a way out. Please open the door. From the other side, only silence. I'm his half-uncle, I said. A moment passed, then a key rattled the lock. The man's narrow face reappeared in the crack. He looked from me to Farid and back. You were wrong about one thing, he said. He's great with a slingshot. I smiled. He's inseparable from that thing. He tucks it in his waist of his pants everywhere he goes. The man who let us in introduced himself as Zaman, the director of the orphanage. I'll take you to my office, he said. We followed him through dim, grimy hallways, where barefoot children, dressed in frayed sweaters, ambled around. We walked past rooms with no floor covering, but matted carpets, and windows shuttered with sheets of plastic. Skeleton frames of steel beds, most with no mattresses, filled the rooms. How many orphans live here? Farid said. More than we have room for, about 250. Zanan said over his shoulder. But they're not all orphanages. But they're not all orphans. Many of them have lost their fathers in the war, but their mothers can't feed them because the Taliban don't allow them to work. So they bring their children here. He made a sweeping gesture with his hand and added ruefully, This place is better than the street, but not much better. But not that much better. The building was never meant to be lived in. It used to be a storage warehouse for a carpet manufacturer. So there's no water heater, and they've let the well go dry. He dropped his voice. I asked the Taliban for money to dig a new well for more times than I remember, and they just twirl their rosaries and tell me there's no money, no money. He snickered. He pointed to a row of beds along the wall. We don't have enough beds, and not enough mattresses for the beds and not enough mattresses for the beds we do have. Worse, we don't have enough blankets. He showed us a little girl escaping rope with two other kids. You see that girl? This past winter, the children had to share blankets. Her brother died of exposure. He walked on. The last time I checked, we have less than a month's supply of rice left in the warehouse, and when that runs out, the children will have to eat bread and tea for breakfast and dinner. I noticed he made no mention of lunch. He stopped and turned to me. There is very little shelter here, almost no food, no clothes, no clean water. What I have in ample supply here is children who've lost their childhood. But the tragedy is that these are the lucky ones. We're filled beyond capacity, and every day I turn away mothers who bring their children. He took a step towards me. You say there's hope for Sahrab? I hope you don't lie, Agha. But you may, well, be too late. What do you mean? Zaman's eyes shifted. Follow me. What I passed for the director's office was four bare, cracked walls and a mat on the floor, a table and two folding chairs. As Zaman and I sat down, I saw a grey rat poke its head from a burrow in the wall and flit across the room. I cringed when it sniffed at my shoes. Then Zaman's and scurried through the open door. What do you mean by it may be too late? I said. Would you like some chai? I said. I could make some. Nay, thank you. I'd rather we talk. Zaman tilted back in his chair and crossed his arms around his chest. What I have to tell you is not pleasant. Not to mention that it may be very dangerous. For whom? You and me, and of course for Sahrab, if it's not too late already. I need to know, I said. He nodded. So you say, but first I want to ask you a question. How badly do you want to find your nephew? I thought of the street fights we'd get into when we were kids. All times Hassan used to take them on for me. 2 against 1. Sometimes 3 against 1. I'd wince and watch, tempted to step in, but always stopping short, always held back by something. I looked at the hallway, saw a group of kids dancing in a circle. A little girl, her left leg amputated below the knee, sat on a ratty mattress and watched, smiling and clapping along with the other children. I saw Farid watching children too, his own mangled hand hanging at his side. I remembered Wahid's voice, and I realized something. I would not leave Afghanistan without finding Sohrab. Tell me where he is, I said. Zaman's gaze lingered on me. Then he nodded, picked up a pencil, and twirled it between his fingers. Keep my name out of it, I promise. He tapped the table with the pencil. Despite your promise, I think I'll live to regret this, but perhaps it's just as well. I'm damned anyway. But if something can be done for Sohrab, I'll tell you because I believe you. You have the look of a desperate man. He was quiet for a long time. There is a Talib official, he muttered. He visits once every month or so, or 2. He brings cash with him. Not a lot, but better than nothing at all. His shifty eyes fell on me, rolled away. Usually he'll take a girl, but not always. And you allow this? Farid said behind me. He was going around the table, closing in on Zaman. What choice do I have? Zaman shot back. He pushed himself away from the desk. You're the director here, Farid said. Your job is to watch over these children. There's nothing I can do to stop it. You're selling children, Farid barked. Farid, sit down, let it go, I said. But I was too late, because suddenly Farid was leaping over the table. Zaman's chair was flying as Farid fell on him and pinned him to the floor. The director thrashed beneath Farid and made muffled screaming sounds. His legs kicked, a desk drawer free, and sheets of paper spilled to the floor. I ran around the desk and saw why Zaman's screaming was muffled. Farid was strangling him. I grasped Farid's shoulders with both hands and pulled hard. He snatched away from me. That's enough, I barked, but Farid's face had flushed red. His lips pulled back in a snarl. I'm killing him. You can't stop me. I'm killing him, he sneered. Get off him. I'm killing him. Something in his voice told me that if I didn't do something quickly, I'd witness my first murder. The children are watching, Farid. They're watching, I said. His shoulder muscle tightened under my grip, and for a moment I thought he'd keep squeezing Zaman's neck away. Anyway. Then he turned around and saw the children. They were standing silently by the door, holding hands, some of them crying. I felt Farid's muscles slacken. He dropped his hands, rose to his feet. He looked down on Zaman and dropped a mouthful of spit on his face. Then he walked to the door and closed it. Zaman struggled to his feet, blotted his bloody lips with his sleeve, wiped the spit off his cheek. Coughing and wheezing, he put his skull cap, his glasses, saw both lenses had cracked, and took them off. He buried his face in his hands. None of us said anything for a long time. Zaman struggled to his feet, blotted his bloody lips with his sleeve. Wait, no. He took Sohrab a month ago, Zaman finally croaked, hands still shielding his face. You call yourself a director? Farid said. Zaman dropped his hands. I haven't been paid in over 6 months. I'm broke because I've spent my life savings on this orphanage. Everything I ever owned or inherited, I sold to run this god-forsaken place. You think I don't have family in Pakistan and Iran? I could have run like everyone else, but I didn't. I stayed because of them. He pointed to the door. If I deny him 1 child, he takes 10. So I let him take one and leave the judging to Allah. I swallow my pride and take this goddamn filthy dirty money. Then I go to the bazaar, I buy food for the children. Farid dropped his eyes. What happens to the children he takes? I asked. Zaman rubbed his eyes with his forefinger and thumb. Sometimes they come back. Who is he? How do we find him? I said, go to Ghazi Stadium tomorrow. You'll see him at halftime. He'll be the one wearing some black sunglasses. He picked up his broken glasses and turned them in his hands. I want to go now. The children are frightened. He escorted us out. As the truck pulled away, I saw Zaman in the side view mirror, standing in the doorway. A group of children surrounded him, clutching the hem of his loose shirt. I saw he put on his broken glasses. Chapter 21. We crossed the river and drove north through the crowded Pashtunistan square. Baba used to take me to Khaybar restaurant there for kebab. The building was still standing, but the doors were padlocked, the windows shattered, and the letters K and R missing from its name. I saw a dead body near the restaurant. There had been a hanging. A young man dangled from the end of the rope, tied to a beam, his face puffy and blue. The clothes he'd worn on the last day of his life shredded, bloody. Hardly anyone seemed to notice him. We rode silently through the square and headed towards the Wazir Akbar Khan district. Everywhere I looked, a haze of dust covering the city with its sun-dried brick buildings. A few blocks north of Pashtunistan Square, Farid pointed to two men talking animatedly at a busy street corner. One of them was hobbling on one leg, the other leg amputated below the knee. He cradled an artificial leg in his arms. You know what they're doing? Haggling over the leg. He's selling his leg? Farid nodded. You can get good money for it on the black market. Feed your kids for a couple of weeks. To my surprise, most of the houses in Wazir Akbar Khan district still had roofs and standing walls. In fact, they were in pretty good shape. Trees still peeked over the walls, and the streets weren't nearly as rubble-strewn as the ones in Kartisay. Faded street signs, some twisted and bullet-pocketed, still pointed the way. This isn't so bad, I remarked. No surprise, most of the important people live here now. Taliban? Them too. Farid said, Who else? Who else? He drove us into a wide street with fairly clean sidewalks and walled homes on either side. The people behind the Taliban, the real brains of this government, if you can call it that. Arabs, Chechens, Pakistanis, Farid said. He pointed northwest. Street 15, that way, is called Sarak-e-Mehmana, Street of the Guests. That's what they call them here. Guests. I think someday these guests are going to pee all over the carpet. I think that's it, I said. Over there. I pointed to the landmark that used to serve as a guide for me when I was a kid. If I ever got lost, Baba used to say, remember that our street is the one with the pink house at the end of it. The pink house with the steeply pitched roof had been the neighborhood's only house of color in the old days. It still was. Farid turned onto the street. I saw Baba's house right away. We find the little turtle behind tangles of sweet briar in the yard. We don't know how it got there, and we're too excited to care. We paint its shell a bright red. Hassan's idea, and a good one. This way, we'll never lose it in the bushes. We pretended we were a pair of daredevil explorers who discovered a giant prehistoric monster in some distant jungle, and we've brought it back for the world to see. We set it down on the wooden wagon Ali built Hassan last winter for his birthday. Pretend it's a giant steel cage. Behold the fire-breathing monstrosity. We march on the grass and pull the wagon behind us. Around apple and cherry trees, which become skyscrapers soaring into clouds, heading poking out of thousands of windows to watch the spectacle passing below. We walk over the little semi-lunar bridge. Baba had built near a cluster of fig trees. It becomes a great suspension bridge joining cities, and the little pond below a foamy sea. Fireworks explode above the bridge's massive pylons, and armed soldiers salute us on both sides as gigantic steel cables shot into the sky. The little turtle bouncing around in the cab. We drag the wagon around the circular red brick driveway outside the wrought iron gates and return with salutes of the world's leaders as they stand and applaud. We are Hassan and Amir, famed adventurers and the world's greatest explorers, about to receive a medal of honor for our courageous feat. Gingerly, I walked up to the driveway where tufts of weed now grew between the sun-faded bricks. I stood outside the gates of my father's house, feeling like a stranger. I set my hands on the rusty bars, remembering how I'd run through these same gates thousands of times as a child. For things that mattered not at all now, and yet had seemed so important then, I peered in. The driveway extension that led from the gates to the yard where Hassan and I took turns falling this summer. We learned to ride a bike. We didn't look as wide or as long as I remembered it. The asphalt had split in a lightning streak pattern, and more tangles of weeds sprouted through the fissures. Most of the poplar trees had been chopped down. The trees Hassan and I used to climb to shine our mirrors into the neighbors' homes. The ones still standing were nearly leafless. The wall of ailing corns was still there, though I saw no corn, ailing or otherwise. Along that wall now, the paint had begun to peel, and sections of it had sloughed off altogether. The lawn had turned the same brown as the haze of dust hovering over the city, dotted by bald patches of dirt where nothing grew at all. A jeep was parked in the driveway, and that looked all wrong. Baba's black Mustang belonged there. For years the Mustang's 8 cylinders roared to life every morning, rousing me from sleep. I saw that oil had spilled onto the jeep and stained the driveway like a big Rorschach ink blot. Beyond the jeep, an empty wheelbarrow lay on its side. I saw no sign of the rose bushes that Baba and Ali had planted on the left side of the driveway. Only dirt that spilled onto the asphalt. and wheat. Farid honked twice behind me. We should go, Alha. We'll draw attention, he called. Just give me 1 more minute, I said. The house itself was far from the sprawling white mansion I remembered from my childhood. It looked smaller. The roof sagged, and the plaster was cracked. The windows to the living room, the foyer, and the upstairs guest bathroom were broken, patched haphazardly with sheets of clear plastic or wooden boards nailed across the frames. The paint, once sparkling white, had faded to ghostly gray and eroded in parts, revealing the layered bricks beneath. The front steps had crumbled like so much else in Kabul. My father's house was the picture of fallen splendor. I found the window to my old bedroom. Second floor, third window south of the main steps to the house. I stood on tiptoes, saw nothing behind the walls but shadows. 25 years earlier, I had stood behind the same window. Thick rain dripping down the panes and my breath fogging up the glass. I had watched Hassan and Ali load their belongings into the trunk of my father's car. Amir Agha, Farid called again. I'm coming. I shot back, insanely. I wanted to go in, wanted to walk up the front steps where Ali used to make Hassan and me cut off our snow boots. I wanted to step into the foyer, smell the orange peel Ali always tossed into the stove to burn with sawdust. Sit at the kitchen table, have tea with a slice of naan, listen to Hassan sing old Hazara songs. Another honk. I walked back to the Land Cruiser parked along the sidewalk. Farid sat smoking behind the wheel. I have to look at one more thing, I told him. Can you hurry? Give me 10 minutes. Go then. Then, just as I turned to go, just forget it all. Makes it easier. To what? To go on, Farid said. He flicked his cigarette out of the window. How much more do you need to see? Let me save you trouble. Nothing that you remembered had survived. Best to forget. I don't want to forget anymore, I said. Give me 10 minutes. We hardly broke a sweat, Hassan and I, when he hiked up the hill just north of Baba's house. We scampered about the hilltop, chasing each other, or sat on a sloped ridge, where there was a good view of the airport in the distance. We'd watched airplanes take off and land, go running again. Now, by the time I reached the top of the craggy hill, each rapt breath felt like inhaling fire. Sweat trickled down my face. I stood wheezing for a while, a stitch in my side. Then I went looking for the abandoned cemetery. It didn't take me long to find it. It was still there, and so was the old pomegranate tree. I leaned against the grey stone gateway to the cemetery where Hassan had buried his mother. The old metal gates hanging off the hinges were gone, and the headstone was barely visible through the thick tangles of weeds that had claimed the plot. A pair of crows sat on the low wall that enclosed the cemetery. Hassan had said in his letter that the pomegranate tree hadn't borne fruits in years. Looked at the wilted leafless tree. I doubted it ever would again. I stood under it. I remembered all the times we climbed its straddling branches, our legs swinging, dappled sunlight flickered through the leaves and casting on our faces of mosaic light and shadow. The tangy taste of pomegranate crept into my mouth. I hunkered down on my knees and brushed my hands against the trunk. I found what I was looking for, the carving and dulled, almost faded together. But it was still there. Amin and Hassan, the sultans of Kabul. I traced the curve of the letter with my fingers, picked small bits of bark from the tiny crevices. I sat cross-legged at the foot of the tree and looked south on the city of my childhood. In those days, tree tops poked behind the walls of every house. The sky stretched white and blue, and laundry drying on clotheslines gleamed in the sun. If you listened hard, you might even have heard the call of the fruit seller passing through Wazir Akbar Khan with his donkey. Cherries, apricots, grapes. In the early evening, you would have heard the muezzin's call to prayer from the mosque in Sharanun. I heard a honk and saw Farid waving at me. It was time to go. We drove south again, back towards Pashtunistan Square. We passed several more red pickup trucks with armed, bearded young men crammed into the cabs. Farid cursed under his breath every time we passed one. I paid for a room at a small hotel near Pashtunistan Square. 3 little girls dressed in identical black dresses and white scarves clung to the side, bespectacled man behind the counter. He charged me $75, an unthinkable price given the run-down appearance of that place, but I didn't mind. Exploitation to finance a beach house in Hawaii was one thing. Doing it to feed your kids was another. There was no hot running water, and a crackled toilet didn't flush. Just a single steel frame bed with a worn mattress and a racked blanket and a wooden chair in the corner. The window overlooking the square hadn't been replaced. As I lowered my suitcase, I noticed a dry blood stain on the wall behind the bed. I gave Farid some money and he went out to get food. He returned with 4 sizzling skewers of kebab, French naan, and a bowl of white rice. We sat on the bed, all but devoured the food. There was one thing that hadn't changed in Kabul after all. The kebab was as succulent and delicious as I remembered. That night, I took the bed and Farid lay on the floor, wrapped himself with an extra blanket for which the hotel owner charged me an additional fee. No light came into the room except for the moonbeams streaming through the broken windows. Farid said the owner had told him that Kabul had been without electricity for 2 days now, and his generator needed fixing. We talked for a while. He told me about growing up in Mazar al-Sharif in Jalalabad. He told me about a time shortly after he and his father joined the jihad and fought the Shorawi in the Panjshir Valley. They were stranded without food and ate locusts to survive. He told me of the day helicopter gunfire killed his father, of the day the landmine took his 2 daughters. He asked me about America. I told him that in America, you could step into a grocery store and buy any of 15 or 20 different types of cereal. The lamb was always fresh and the milk cold, the fruit plentiful, and the water clear. Every home had a TV, and every TV had a remote, and you could get a satellite dish if you wanted. Receive over 500 channels. 500! Farid exclaimed. 500. We felt silent for a while. Just when I thought I had fallen asleep, Farid chuckled. Agha, did you hear that Mullah Nasruddin did when his daughter came home and complained that her husband had beaten her? I could feel him smiling in the dark, and the smile of my own formed on my face. There wasn't an Afghan in the world who didn't know at least a few jokes about the bumbling mullah. What? He beat her too, then sent her back to tell her husband that the mullah was no fool. If the bastard was going to beat his daughter, the mullah would beat his wife in return. I laughed, partly at the joke, partly at how Afghanistan humor never changed. Wars were waged. the internet was invented, and a robot had rolled on the surface of Mars, and in Afghanistan we were still telling Mullah Nasruddin jokes. Did you hear about the time Mullah had placed a heavy bag on his shoulders and was riding his donkey? I said no. Someone on the street said, "Why don't you put the bag on the donkey?" He said, "That would be cruel. I'm heavy enough already for the poor thing." We exchanged Mullah Nasruddin jokes until we ran out of them, and we felt silent again. "Amir Agha," Farid said, startling me from near sleep. "Yes. Why are you here? I mean, why are you really here?" "I told you. For the boy?" "For the boy." Farid shifted on the ground. "It's hard to believe. Sometimes I myself can hardly believe I'm here." "No, what I mean to ask is, why that boy? He came all the way from America for a Shia." That killed all the laughter in me, and the sleep. "I'm tired," I said. "Let's get some sleep." Farid's snoring soon echoed through the empty room. I stayed awake, hands crossed on my chest, staring into the starlit night through the broken window, and thinking that maybe the people said about Afghanistan was true. What people said about Afghanistan was true. Maybe it was a hopeless place. A bustling crowd was filling Ghazi Stadium when we walked through the entrance tunnels. Thousands of people milled about the tightly packed concrete terraces. Children played in the aisles and chased each other up and down the steps. The scent of garbanzo beans in spicy sauce hung in the air, mixed with the smell of dung and sweat. Farid and I walked past street peddlers selling cigarettes, pine nuts, and biscuits. A scrawny boy in the tweed jacket grabbed my elbow and spoke into my ear, asked me if I wanted to buy some sexy pictures. "Very sexy, Agha," he said, his alert eyes darting side to side, reminding me of a girl who a few years earlier had tried to sell me crack in the Tenderloin district in Francisco. The kid peeled one side of the jacket open and gave me a fleeting glance of his sexy pictures, postcards of Hindi movies showing doe-eyed, sultry actresses, fully dressed, in the arms of their leading men. "So sexy," he repeated. "Nay, thanks," I said, pushing past him. "He gets caught. They'll give him a flogging that will awaken his father in the grave," Farid muttered. There was no assigned seating, of course. No one showed us politely to our section aisle, row, and seat. There never had been, even in the old days of monarchy. We found a decent spot to sit, just left of midfield, though it took some shoving and elbowing on Farid's part. I remembered how green the playing field grass had been in the 70s, when Baba used to bring me to soccer games here. Now the pitch was a mess. There were holes and craters everywhere, most notably a pair of deep holes in the ground behind the south and goal posts, and there was no grass at all, just dirt. When the two teams finally took the field, all wearing long pants despite the heat, and play began, it became difficult to follow the ball in the clouds of dust kicked up by the players. Young, whip-toting talibs roamed the aisles, striking anyone who cheered too loudly. They brought them out shortly after the halftime whistle blew. A pair of dusty red pickup trucks, like the ones I'd seen around town since I'd arrived, rode into the stadium through the gates. The crowd rose to its feet. A woman dressed in green burqa sat in the cab of one truck, a blindfolded man in the other. The trucks drove around the track slowly, as if to let the ground get a long look. It had the desired effect. People craned their necks, pointed, stood on tiptoes next to me. Farid's Adam apple bobbed up and down as he mumbled a prayer under his breath. The red trucks entered the playing field, rode towards one end into a clouds of dust, sunlight reflecting off their hubcaps. A third truck met them at the end of the street. This one's cab was filled with something, and I suddenly understood the purpose of those two holes behind the goalposts. They unloaded the third truck. The crowd murmured in anticipation. "Do you want to stay?" Farid said bravely. "No," I said. I had never in my life wanted to be away from a place as badly as I did now, but we have to stay. Two talibs with clutching coves slung across their shoulders helped the blindfolded man from the first truck, and two others helped the burqa-clad woman. The woman's feet buckled under her hair and she slumped to the ground. The soldiers pulled her up and she slumped again. When they tried to lift her again, she screamed and kicked. I will never, as long as I draw breath, forget the sound of that scream. As it was a cry of a wild animal trying to pry its mangled leg free from the bear trap. Two more talibs joined in and helped force her into one of the chest deep holes. The blindfolded man, on the other hand, quietly allowed them to lower him into the hole dug for him. Now only the accused pair's torsos protruded from the ground. A chubby, white-bearded clerk, dressed in grey garments, stood near the goalposts and cleared his throat into a handheld microphone. Behind him, the woman in the hole was still screaming, and he recited a lengthy prayer from the Quran, his nasal voice undulating through the sudden hush of the stadium's crowd. I remember something Baba had said to me a long time ago. Piss on the beards of all those self-righteous monkeys. They do nothing but thumb their rosaries and recite a book written in a tongue they don't even understand. God help us all if Afghanistan ever falls into their hands. When the prayer was done, the cleric cleared his throat. "Brothers and sisters," he called, speaking in Farsi, his voice booming through the stadium. "We are here today to carry out Sharia. We are here today to carry out justice. We are here today because the will of Allah and the word of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, are alive and well here in Afghanistan, our beloved homeland. We listen to what God says and we obey because we are nothing but humble, powerless creatures before God's greatness." What does God say? I ask you. What does God say? God says that every sinner must be punished in a manner befitting his sin. Those are not my words, nor the words of my brothers. Those are the words of God. He pointed with his free hand to the sky. My head was pounding and the sun felt too much hot. Every sinner must be punished in a manner befitting his sin, the cleric repeated into the mic, lowering his voice. Enunciating every word slowly, dramatically. And the matter of punishment, brothers and sisters, befits. And what manner of punishment, brothers and sisters, befits the adulterer? How shall we punish those who dishonor the sanctity of marriage? How shall we deal with those who spit in the face of God? How shall we answer those who throw stones at the windows of God's house? We shall throw the stones back. He shut off the microphone. A low-pitched murmur spread through the crowd. Next to me, Farid was shaking his head, and they call themselves Muslims, he whispered. Then a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out of the pickup truck. The sight of him drew cheers from a few spectators. This time, no one was stuck with a whip for cheering too loudly. The tall man's sparkled white garments glimmered in the afternoon sun. The hem of his loose shirt fluttered in the breeze. His arms spread like those of Jesus on the cross. He greeted the crowd by turning slowly in a full circle. When he faced our section, I saw he was wearing dark round sunglasses like the ones John Lennon wore. That must be our man, Farid said. Then the tall talib with the black sunglasses walked to the pile of stones he had unloaded from the third truck. He picked up a rock and showed it to the crowd. The noise fell, replaced by a buzzing sound that rippled through the stadium. I looked around me and saw that everyone was skiing. The talib looked absurdly like a baseball pitcher on the mound, hurled the stone at the blindfolded man in the hole. It struck the side of his head. The woman screamed again. The crowd made a startled "oh" sound. I closed my eyes and covered my face with my hands. The spectators' "oh" rhymed with each flinging of the stone, and that went on for a while. When they stopped, I asked Farid if it was over. He said no. I guess people's throats had tired. I don't know how much longer. I sat with my face with my face in my hands. I know that I reopened my eyes when I heard people around me asking, Mord, is he dead? The man in the hole was now a mangled mess of blood and shredded rags. His head slumped forward, chin on chest. The talib in the John Lennon glasses was looking down at another man squatting next to the hole, tossing a rock up and down in his hand. The squatting man had one end of a stethoscope into his ears, and the other pressed on a chest of the man in the hole. He removed the stethoscope from his ears and shook his head at the talib in the sunglasses. The crowd moaned. John Lennon walked back to the mound. When it was all over, when the bloodied corpses had been unceremoniously tossed into the backs of red pickup trucks, separated once a few men with shovels hurriedly filled the holes. One of them made a passing attempt at covering up the large bloodstains by kicking dirt over them. A few minutes later, the teams took the field. Second half was underway. Our meeting was arranged for 3 o'clock that afternoon. The swiftness with which the appointment was set surprised me. I expected delays, a round of questioning at least, perhaps a check of our papers. But I was reminded of how unofficial these official matters still were in Afghanistan. All Farid had to do was tell one of the whip-carrying talibs that we had personal business to discuss with a man in white. Farid and he exchanged words. The guy with the whip then nodded and shouted something in Pashto to a young man on the field, who ran to the south end goalposts where the talib in the sunglasses was chatting with a plump cleric who'd given the sermon. The three spoke. I saw the guy in the sunglasses look up. He nodded, said something in the messenger's ear. The young man relayed the message back to us. It was set then, 3 o'clock. This concludes our reading of The Kite Runner from Off the Bookshelf. Your reader has been Hiba Had. Thank you.